the most renowned space company in the world, Spacex is already running out of patience with the FAA's delay to issue its launch permit. The company has finally given a befitting static fire test to their favorite Starship, Ship 24 and Booster 7. The FAA is the only nightmare they're now facing to launch the Starship into space. How did SpaceX plan to ignore the FAA and do its thing by testing and launching Starships into space continuously without the FAA's conditional launch permit? Kindly stick around as we explore it all in today's video. All expectation is laid out believing that the FAA will grant SpaceX the launch permit for the first orbital launch of its next-generation Starship rocket in the near future. But after several months of waiting and being patient, SpaceX does not seem to eat the fat bone. All these months of waiting and keeping hopes alive to have the liberty of launching the Starship is eventually becoming fruitless, and SpaceX is running out of patience. Gary Henry, Senior Director of National Security Space Solutions at SpaceX, stated that Starship is still on track to launch as early as March 2023 during his speech at the 2023 Space Mobility Conference. A few weeks ago, CEO Elon Musk also tweeted that SpaceX had a clear shot at late February to launch the Starship. He even assured that a March launch attempt is highly likely. But right now, February is now out of reach. Even though March is still running, is there any certainty that the Starship will launch in March, as Henry said at the Mobility Conference? Or will the launch date be pushed forward again, while the FAA do what they are good at, delaying SpaceX launch progress? Or will SpaceX go ahead and launch the Starship into space, while disobeying whatever policies that has been enacted by the FAA? The last time SpaceX violated the FAA rules by firing a rocket, on February 17 /sub, the FAA issued a $175,000 fine against SpaceX for failing to submit required data for a Falcon 9 mission that was launched way back in August 2022. The agency insisted that SpaceX didn't submit launch collision analysis trajectory data before launching the rocket. The Falcon 9 mission sent a batch of Starlink satellites in low Earth orbit. According to the FAA notice, the data are needed to assess the probability of a spacecraft colliding with one of the thousands of tracked objects orbiting Earth. At this time, SpaceX may misunderstand the FAA as being a barrier to their launch process, and also delaying the launch of the Starship that has been under development for more than half a decade now. It was the first time the FAA proposed a civil penalty for a space company failing to submit data before a launch. SpaceX was given 30 days to respond to the FAA's notice and also pay the fine. But an FAA spokesperson countered the public opinion and said the penalty is unrelated to SpaceX's other missions, including the Starship test. SpaceX didn't respond to a request to comment on the FAA fine or fix a launch date for the Starship. But now that Starship is ready to launch Starship into space, the FAA may stand a change to frustrate SpaceX as a barrier for the Starship to reach orbit. However, though SpaceX operates like a regular aerospace company, but the dismay here is that launching the Starship into space is facing unprecedented gridlock right now. Haven spent several years to construct a single prototype made of properly recorded, thoroughly approved parts. Reaching orbit with the Starship is now becoming a hard nut to crack. On the other hand, even though SpaceX is still hoping to reach orbit someday through the Starship, when the FAA finally have mercy and issue them the launch permit, the company still continues to crank out different prototypes of the Starship, each one being an evolution of the previous test findings with quick and frequent adjustments to any system or component that requires the necessary inspection. At the Morgan Stanley TMT conference, Elon Musk was too confident in his words when he said that SpaceX will soon launch Starship. In his words, he said, "I'm not saying it will get to orbit, but I am guaranteeing excitement." Elon was a guest speaker at the Morgan Stanley 2023 Technology, Media, and Telecommunications Conference on the 7/sub of March. He discussed more about the reason why he bought Twitter and how his team is working to improve the social media platform to be more flexible for everyone. Musk said he hopes that Twitter can become the place where you find truth with the least amount of error. During the interview at TMT, he shared his hopes for SpaceX's upcoming launch of the Starship orbital flight test. In his words, he said, "We are getting ready for the first launch of Starship. This is a very difficult program," says Musk. The rocket is roughly 2.5 times the thrust of the Saturn V, so if or when it reaches orbit it'll be by far the largest rocket to reach orbit. But more importantly, it is designed to be the first fully reusable rocket ever, he said. The key to expanding life beyond Earth is a fully and rapidly reusable orbital rocket. This is a very hard problem given the constraints. Earth has a thick atmosphere and strong gravity. It is only barely possible to do this. That is why it has not been done before, he explained. Elon Musk will certainly transport humans to space inside the Starship, but is the FAA ready to allow SpaceX have its way to orbit? He continued to talk about SpaceX's preparation of launching the Starship into space. According to him, we've got a whole series of Starships in South Texas, so I think we've got, hopefully, about an 80% chance of reaching orbit this year. It will probably take us a couple more years to achieve a full and rapid reusability, which I can't emphasize enough. It is the profound breakthrough that is needed to extend life beyond Earth, because it lowers the cost of access to space by orders of magnitude, said Musk. Musk also talked about how important it is to optimize the Starship with reusability. In the same way, let's say, there were no airplanes that were reusable. How expensive would air flight be? It would be insane, he explained. You'll have to buy a new airplane every time you flew somewhere. You'll have to tow a small airplane behind you for the return flight. That's just not good at scale. Musk summarized the Morgan Stanley interview by affirming that Starship could make life multiplanetary real by taking the human race to Mars. I sort of wonder, if we are able to get to be multiplanetary, that will be a forcing function to ultimately improving spaceflight to become multistellar, to go to other star systems. And I think we may discover that there are many long-dead one-planet civilizations. We don't want to be one of those lame one-planet civilizations. Please, he joked. According to Elon Musk, humans shouldn't be too dumb to settle only on Earth while there are other planets, especially Mars, where we can also colonize. From the Artemis contract between SpaceX and NASA, astronauts will be landing on the moon in 2024 to 2025 using the Starship. Although 2 years may seem like a long time, it has already been 2 years since SpaceX conducted a Starship hop test at Boca Chica. In the next 2 years, SpaceX has to launch enough Starship missions so that they can reliably land humans on the moon. But wait a moment, have you bothered to ask why the FAA is holding SpaceX from launching the Starship into space, and why the flight restriction by the agency? The sad fact is that the Starship, along with Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy, launches start from U.S. airspace, and you need some sort of license or approval from the FAA to perform a flight if you plan to fly over 400 feet without crew members. Even though you want to fly a balloon above 400 feet, you will also need a launch license from the FAA. And why is this so? It's simple, because the FAA sets rules for the manner, time, place, means, and safety of various sorts of flight. It also controls what happens in all U.S. airspace. Therefore, the FAA is in charge of everything space flight in the United States. That is why Elon Musk cannot disobey or go against the FAA's policies. Do you think SpaceX will disobey the FAA and go ahead to launch the Starship into space, having waited for so long to get a positive response from the FAA? They have taken care of FAA $175,000 fine and have released a launching date. Check out how this would be possible just clicking on the video.